Hey there, and welcome to another Dave Does video. And in today's video I'm going to take you through my personal top 10 Megadeth albums. And there's plenty to choose from. They've had a very illustrious career and they're still going with a new album that came out earlier this year, or actually now late at the end of 2022. I forgot we're already in 2023. So the question is the new album part of it? Well, I'll let you know in a second, but let's just count these straight down, and I would be intrigued to know from you, what's your opinion on my choices and my reasons behind why I've picked these particular albums, and what would have been in your top 10. Now, in number 10 position, we have Cryptic Writers. And this is a bit of a controversial choice. Cryptic Writers was a bit of an album where they'd kind of gone off the deep end. I think they fully went off the deep end when they did Risk. But what I liked about Cryptic Writers is they weren't afraid to experiment. They went off and tried a little bit more commerciality. I thought their songwriting was very good on the album. Yes, it wasn't going to be something like a Rust in Peace, but I actually really appreciated what they did with their songwriting ability, and they had some great tracks on there. And even though you still had some standout tracks like the Triple F, and obviously things like Vortex as well, where you had this high thrash energy in there. So they were great songs, and that is why Cryptic Writings is in my number 10 position. Number 9, we have The System Has Failed. I thought it was a good album. It's better than Cryptic Writings purely because it's still kind of, it's almost going back to an earlier thrash days after obviously what happened with Cryptic Writings and The World Needs a Hero. We had, so there's quite a few albums that kind of came in that sort of real after that period of Risk, where the band was being not really taken seriously, and so they needed to come back with a good hard thrash album, and I thought The System Has Failed was a good solid approach to that. So good turnaround album. Number 8, and this will be a very controversial one, Super Collider. I actually really liked the album. It was a case of, I think after we did albums like 13, they again went down a little bit of a bit more of a commercial route with some of their riffs, a bit more hard rock rather than thrash, but I felt the album was quite accessible. It wasn't to everyone's cup of tea, I understand that, but for me, I'm a big hard rock fan, and I thought it was a great track, or a great album for them to put out. I was surprised by how much crap it got, but I thought it was still a very, very solid performance by Megadeth. Number 7 isn't officially an album in the sense of albums like Rust in Peace, etc., but for me it sits up there and should be included, and that is Hidden Treasures. When you look at all their bonus songs that they did, from the cover of like things like No Mr. Nice Guy, Diadems, all amazing tracks, would have been suited on any particular album that they'd have come out around those periods. So I actually think that there's not 99 Ways to Die. Brilliant track. It should have been on another album. So the fact that it wasn't means it gets into my top 10. Number 6, So Far, So Good, So What? Obviously well known for its Anarchy in the UK, and of course In My Darkest Hour. It's me racking my brain to make sure it was on that album. Yes, it was. Suddenly went a bit blank. But another solid album. We know that the band was going through a bit of a time with substance abuse at that time, but it still has some great tracks on there, and is what I class as kind of that classic old school Megadeth sound. Number 5 is Dystopia. Great album when it came out. Really kind of kicked them back up into kind of main stage. With something a little bit refreshing, something a bit new for them to come out with, that people, after Super Collider, it kind of made them feel that they were back on the kind of main track again. Good songwriting throughout the album, and lyrically, great tracks. I thought there's some great melody lines that Dave Mustaine was doing, and of course guitar work was outstanding on Super Collider. Oh, sorry, Dystopia. I don't know why I said Super Collider, because I said Super Collider earlier. Okay, number 4, we have Peace Sells, But Who's Buying? Of course, we all know that one. The great Peace Sells, But Who's Buying is a great track on its own, and that alone would get it near the top. The rest of the album is all full of great cuts as well. You really can't fault it as an album, especially coming off of the back of Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good, which was a fairly good debut, but obviously was going up against things like Kill 'Em All from Metallica, so a bit of a challenge, but was still a great album from Killing Is My Business. But unfortunately, Peace Sells But Whom Spine was just a hell of a lot better and was a great way for them to step it up. Okay, so number 3, here's the contentional one. So number 3 for me is Rust in Peace. It is the epitome one of thrash. It's the one that gets compared to with Master of Puppets, or which one is better. I don't think you need to know which one is better, it's just which one you probably would prefer to listen to, maybe. Or it's kind of apples and oranges. They're both very different styles of thrash album. But again, this is where we get into the stage where there's not really a bad song on that album. And if you were trying to say to someone what is a thrash album, Rust in Peace is probably the one to give them, to show them what the abilities are. Because we all know Holy Wars, The Punishment Is Due is a great track to open an album out to. So it is just a phenomenal album, but it didn't make it into my top 2. So what was number 2? So number 2 is Countdown to Extinction. This was the album that really got me into Megadeth right at the beginning. That was the first album I heard, with Symphony of Destruction being the first track I'd ever heard of Megadeth. And that opened up a whole can of worms for me to kind of, or Alice in Wonderland, of falling through the rabbit hole into Megadeth. And then I went backwards from there. But a great album. Architecture of Aggression, Foreclosure of a Dream is absolutely a maniac of a song. It's just so heavy. We've got High Speed Dirt. I mean, there is just, again, there's not really Sweat and Bullets maybe is probably the weakest track on the album, but it's still a really strong album all the way through. And for me, it's my memory of getting into the album or the band for the first time. So what is my number 1? Well, my number 1 has got to have been Euthanasia. And this is where they'd moved slightly further away from Countdown to Extinction. This was that great kind of segue between that and obviously Cryptic Writers. But I think this is where they kind of got it right as far as their commerciality. And I think if they hadn't got into Cryptic Writings and had moved on to something like Dystopia, that sort of style, it would have been fine. But the fact is they kind of went further down after this album. But for me, Euthanasia, we've got Train of Consequences in there, the Power of a Tout Le Monde, I Thought I Knew It All, Killing Road. It's just a classic album for me. It's one of the few albums of Megadeth that I can put on and I can just enjoy it all the way through without having to skip. The songwriting is outstanding. The vocal melodies are spot on. And this is, for me, is where Dave Mustaine had stopped trying to write power, fast, thrash. He'd actually started thinking about songwriting as more of something that people could listen to and get into without it having to be sort of slam your head, slam pits, mosh pits. It was something you could sing along with. And I think he did an amazing job on Euthanasia, and that is why that is my number 1 album from Megadeth. Now, I would love to know what you think in the comments down below. Which ones would have you changed? What about the albums I didn't include in this particular list? Should they have been in the top 10, and why? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you very much for watching, and that, of course, is how Dave does it.